to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in health and finance and career. But more importantly, this podcast is all about the transition out of sport. It's a major issue today. Athletes go through the challenges of losing identity and things with financial literacy. So we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their transition out of sport ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is, in fact, life after sports. So excited today. Brad Steere. How you doing, Brad?
Fantastic. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing great, thanks. So Brad was a college baseball player. He played at Northwood University in Michigan. And after he was done playing, he got into coaching, which is kind of a natural fit, and coached some different teams. And then he kind of had another transition into professional bodybuilding, which he'll tell us a little about later. And then ultimately, seeing the need out there, he said, okay, well, let's start this company. And he's the co-founder and CEO of Continuum Standard. And he'll tell us all about that and the great things that they're doing. So, Brad, let's start with playing sports growing up. How did that shape you leading up into college?
It really was my entire life. I was that kid that I couldn't get enough when I was growing up, and I was actually the little nerd that I organized all the pickup games and kept stats even on our pickup games in the backyard. And so, anytime there was an opportunity, I was playing something and even making up different games. And then baseball kind of turned into my love really early on, and played that from the time I was about 4 years old all the way up through high school. Wrestled and played football, played some other sports, but ran track in high school as well. But baseball was really it, and it was my love and passion, and I continued to chase it. And I'm old enough that a fellow named Chet Lemon was my hero from the '84 Tigers World Series team, and so that was my guiding force. And watching his joy and love of the game really oozed over into mine, and so that continued, and it really shaped my entire life, because it was the discipline, the structure, and the camaraderie. Having teammates around all the time. You were never by yourself. You always had friends around, and it was just a spectacular part of my life.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you guys have a slip and slide and do running bases on the slip and slide?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that's great. See, that was our generation. I don't think they do that anymore. It tore up the grass too much, but like when we were kids, we were allowed to do it. So for people out there, we'd there'd be one guy on each side tossing the baseball, and you had to like go as fast as you can, run and just dive across the slip and slide and see if you could beat the tag, or hopefully it was a bad throw.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess there was that dream of being a professional baseball player as well.
Yep, for sure. It was always there from early on. As long as I can remember, I wanted to be. I was unfortunately not blessed with the size, especially in those days. It was a big guy's sport, and the guys that are playing nowadays really weren't around then. They'll take a guy that's 5'8", 5'9" now with freakish talent. I didn't have either one. I was very good. I was a really smart player, but I did not have major league skills by any means. I had the fortunate situation where a professional scout lived in my area, and he just told me flat out. He says, "Your ceiling is A ball at best, and you might want to consider something else."
Yeah, well, that was good that he was honest with me. I always thought about my dream too was to be a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, talent wasn't there, so now I do podcasts and I'm an entrepreneur. So let's talk about education of transition out of sport. This is something that's always, when we look back at like when you went to school, when I went to school, probably wasn't there too much. But was there any kind of classes or workshops? And I would just talk about a one-day thing that you had when you were in school related to the transition out of sport.
Yeah, back in those days, there wasn't anything. It was all geared towards your transition to a career. So there was job services, but there really wasn't any athletic to corporate world type transition education. Fortunately, I did go to a business school that really focused on the free market system and entrepreneurs, and we got a great education just in the general education of the school, but there were no formal classes that we went through as athletes. And fast forward, I had a daughter, and we'll probably talk about her a little bit in the future podcast here, but she got to go through that. And now they do have those things, everything from people that worry about your brand to the transition, in life in general.
So let's touch on that. So your daughter played soccer at Alabama. So was there actually physically classes like where they might take a semester to position them for that transition?
Yeah, it wasn't formal classes in the sense that they were going into a credited class, but
Okay.
they did have sessions with they had basically brand ambassadors that were responsible for each student. So the the soccer team had their individual that was responsible. So they would go in. There were sessions that they had to go through right as their freshman year, and then a couple as she continued on, and then in her senior year, I think she had a couple in closing out. But again, there's no formalized long classroom training. But Alabama, I will say, it was very unique. It was a different experience than I had, and obviously times have changed dramatically. But the one thing I did see in Gap there, though, is it's all in efforts to look at strictly get a job, move on, and get your next role or your next career. But it really doesn't talk about that transition itself. What's going to happen? What are you going to experience? And so many of them go on to great careers, but they still feel this gap of I was an athlete, and now I'm whatever your job happens to be.
Yeah, and that's tough. And we've talked about going into schools with Alumni Direct and some of our resource partners and just trying to develop some additional curriculum. It seems like a lot of the big schools, they kind of say they've got their own programs. It sounds like Alabama does have a good program, but some of the other schools might not as much. And it seems like some of the smaller schools might be more apt to looking at that. But it's so important. I mean, I was talking to people the other day, probably even having a conversation with you about it as well, of just how, from a recruiting perspective, that as a parent of a young high school athlete, looking at programs that you're going to care about your student athlete, not only while they're there, but also when they're done with the game. And this way, to know that you can go back to your alma mater and get some type of resources, I think is so important. So let's talk a little bit about networking and connecting. And I think it's so important. Talk about this on every podcast. Talk about the importance of doing it while you're still playing the game.
Yeah, it's vital, and it's actually a gap that I had. Looking back on it now, I had a great career, and I enjoy what I do, and life has been fantastic for me. But I will say that it stunted some of the opportunities that would have been available to me, even at the lower level that I was playing at. As we'll talk about, my son-in-law played at Alabama as well, and he's my co-founder in our business. Just the differences between those two, your networks are so much bigger. But it doesn't matter how big the network is if you don't take advantage of it. And you mention it in your podcast, and a lot of your guests talk about it. If you don't start while you're in school, it is very difficult to pick up that skill after, because then it does feel forced and it doesn't feel like you're building a relationship any longer. If you're doing it in school, and actually I heard you, it was one of your recent podcasts, talk about the fact that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're out there making this deep connection with somebody, but sometimes even that CEO or that executive that you contact just wants to keep themselves in touch with the game. And so there's that natural connection, and just making that, you never know which person is going to be the one that opens that door for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always encourage, and we say even like at a high school level, you're surrounded by so many people, and just be open to helping others. I think sometimes people get intimidated by the word networking or connecting, and it's understandable, but just make it fun and just be open, just having conversations. That's what you're building relationships. I've talked to agents that say, well, my guy went through and he played professionally and all that. And then he gets done and he's okay, where's that big job? Where's my 6-figure sales job? And it's not there. Well, it's not there because they never built relationships. And so it is important to do that. And then that kind of parlays into the whole idea of athletes networking across sports. I mean, what did you see with that, either while you were at school or maybe some of what you're seeing more today, like, with your daughter and son-in-law?
It's interesting. I thought in my head, it was so much, or would be so much different between the levels of sport. And I hear differences in this, but at Northwood, we didn't have nearly the level of support, the training table and all the things that they have nowadays, where these athletes they're congregated together. But even with that, we were together with most of the sports. It almost became its own little fraternity around campus, because you're all going through similar things. You all had practices. You all missed out on a lot of the events that the universities have because of that. I expected it to be different and siloed at a bigger school, because you're spending even more time and you have bigger commitments. But actually, in hearing my daughter's experience and my son-in-law's experience, it really isn't. She made connections. She went in early as a freshman, and the same group that she went in with early stayed friends through her entire career. And I'll use an example, not to name drop, but one of her early commits was Terry Arnold, who played at Alabama and now plays for the Lions. And they've stayed connected through the years. And so those connections right there, just building friendships first, but that's easy because those are the people you're with.
Right.
It would be very easy to just absorb into your team. But even when that happens, those teammates are going to disappear. They're going to go all over the world and all over different places. And if you don't make connections outside of your team, then your network's going to stay very small.
Right. That's great advice there. Because I think we always say that the athlete has a similar DNA. You talked about a little before that the preparation, the practice, the leadership, time management, everything that goes into being an athlete. So I like your reference of a fraternity, because fraternity sorority, that's kind of what it is. It is a fraternity sorority of athletes across sports. And so, especially once you're done playing, now you're not in the sport. So why not interact with people that have that commonality?
Absolutely. And, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, you come across somebody that played the same sport. You instantly have it, whether they knew you, whether you went to a different school or not, you both played a sport in college, and there's that commonality right out of the gate. And it makes that networking piece really, really easy for people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so definitely encourage athletes to do that, and to get out and network, not only with just your teammates, but also within the other sports, and then ultimately other schools too, because once you're out, you're meeting people from all over. But again, you have that. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about alumni engagement. So real important. When you were at Northwood, was there a movement to bring alumni back, and not just for the homecoming game, the golf tournament, but more so of like mentoring, or just working with the other athletes, or even if not when you were there, then is there a movement today to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting because it'd be easy to say yes, because there's the visible things that happen. Like you mentioned, the homecoming game. Northwood has this unique concept because they have an auto show, which is actually for a college, is an enormous auto show. Industry wide, it's known, and it's the event that brings everybody back, even more so than homecoming does. But to be really honest, that's the event. Is there this big formalized plan? I don't see it. And I've heard other guests say the same thing. I sure get a lot of email asking for donations, but I don't get a lot of email asking to come back and speak and interact. So I think that's a big gap still, for sure.
Okay. And then, I mean, what I would imagine, probably from your daughter's experience, I don't know if she talked about that at all, but I would imagine being a bigger school, and especially Alabama with their name, that they probably maybe make more of an effort to do that and kind of re-engage their alumni athletes.
It's early on. She just graduated last year, and she's been back a couple times since. But I don't know. I don't know that it's that much different, to be honest. You would think it would be, but I think it's the schools get trapped into that donation cycle, and really wanted to make sure that's flowing, and so they keep the connection to keep the donation. And that sounds a little bit greasy, but let's be honest, that's a big stream of money for them, and they want to keep that going. And I think what you're calling out is actually the right way to do it. In your realm, it's make the connection and the relationship first, and some of those other things will happen naturally. And I think that's the gap that they all see.
Yeah, I bring this up in multiple other podcasts, but like I was on a call with my University of Delaware, where I went, and I was on with a friend of mine who was a Hall of Fame football player there and played 10 years in the NFL. And so we were talking to them, and he's like, tap me in. I want to help. And I was the same way. I was like, and to me, back to the whole sport thing, is that I don't think there's any reason why I can't help somebody in teaching them about networking, connecting, or sales, regardless of what sport. I was a runner, but so what? I mean, I could, teach that football player or basketball player. So as an alumni, just bring that back. And, they just really, they don't have the bandwidth, and more so to be able to, again, that's where they should be tapping into. And so now what we're seeing is more people that we're starting to talk to do want to re-engage their alumni athletes. And I think it's more so not just for the donation, which obviously, like you said, I mean, they need to have that, but they can't lead with that. And so I think to me, if people are more likely to get back if they have a positive experience.
For sure. And I think you hit it on the head. Is it's very difficult to expend those resources to engage that. You're focusing on the students that are there, and the current situation you have. It's very easy to forget all of those hundreds of thousands of people that are out there that actually can create value to your school, and many of them will do it for free.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely. All right. So now here comes the questions. And I don't know, like, if you watch, he's laughing. So if he watched it all the way through, then he did see the questions that come about, because sometimes people are kind of stunned by it. Not that they're hard, but We're gonna catch the DeLorean and Back to the Future because I can relate to that because you and I know what Back to the Future was. Some of these younger athletes don't. So we hop in a DeLorean. We go back to freshman year at Northwood. What advice would you give to freshman Brad? 10 words or less.
I don't know if it'll be 10 words or less, but I'll try to be close. The best advice I would give is you are living on someone else's discipline and have been your entire life. And that's one of the things that sports is great about, but it's also a difficult situation. So my answer is you're living on somebody else's discipline. So make sure you own it before you leave here.
All right. I like it. Now we're going to fast forward to senior Brad.
Always overestimate your own skills.
There you go. All right.
And I'll throw you the reason why. I look back on my career and I don't regret any of the decisions I've made in my life, but I will say I always underestimated my skill and ability, and it stopped me from taking chances on things that A, could help other people, B, could help myself and my family. And that's where we're going next, obviously. Is my son-in-law is the first person that's ever pulled something like that out of me, because he doesn't have that DNA that says I'm going to hold myself back. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to assume I can do it, and let's go.
Yeah, no, that's like the yin and yang, right? As they say. So that's good. So let's talk about your transition out of sports. So, you played baseball at Northwood, as we talked about, you played all sports growing up. Now, all of a sudden, it's kind of over, so to speak. How did that affect you?
It really hit me like a ton of bricks, to be perfectly honest. And I could not put my finger on why. I kept competing at things. I always worked. Discipline and motivation have never been an issue in my life, but yet there was this gap. And I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what it was. No matter how hard I worked at something, no matter how successful I was at it, whether it was my job or the sports I was playing, I never felt like there was that same everyday feeling of really being accomplished and feeling like you're in your place. Looking back now, I know what that is. It's the loss of that structure. That there is nothing on the planet that provides like sports does. And so that's the toughest transition. And to be honest, not to shill for my own business, but that's exactly what we're trying to fill. Is we're trying to help them understand, rebuild that structure very simply, but rebuild that structure. And then the rest of your life, all those other things that you want to do and want to accomplish are on the table.
It's important to look at it that way. And I guess what maybe give some advice to athletes as they are upon it, whether they're finished at the college level, whether they're finished at the professional level, they're fortunate enough to play there, maybe give some advice on, what they should do to kind of maybe along the way prepare for that journey, or even if they didn't prepare, what's next for them?
Yeah, it comes back to identity. Is you've got an identity that has been created through years and years of playing a sport. And what will happen is that identity, it's lost at first, but it doesn't have to be lost forever. And that's probably the advice I would give to every single athlete, regardless of the level that they're playing at, is build your next identity. And you don't do that out of what you want to be. You do it out of the actions that you actually take. So by building a very solid structure of daily habits and routines that work through everything, we call them fence posts that I'll get to here in a second. But if you build that very simple structure, you're creating an identity, and now you can go anywhere you want to go. But if you still hold on to the athlete identity as it was, then you are going to struggle in everything else in your life.
So I said the nuggets, great nuggets there. Just what these athletes should look for. So you're done playing and you got into coaching youth sports, right? And what were you coaching?
Baseball.
Or okay.
Yeah, my love and passion, and I wanted to share that with the next generations of kids. And unfortunately, I had a great group of kids and a great group of parents. I had to get a lot of funding because we wanted to travel, and it was in the early days where travel baseball was not the big machine that it is now. There weren't private companies that did this. They were all individual teams, and people funded it themselves. And so that taught me a ton outside of baseball is how to fundraise. And again, back to your networking piece, that's the key is finding your connections, people that have the same interests and that you've got a relationship that want to support you. And so fortunately, I was in a situation that we had a lot of people like that, and it worked out really well. We put a great team together, and for about 4 years, we played a U16 team and a U18 team in what they called Stan Musial at that time for the U18, and Mickey Mantle for the
I remember
U16.
that.
And it was great. It was a great time, and a wonderful time in my life, and the closest thing that I could ever come if I wasn't competing to getting that same feeling.
That's good. Um, Talk about athletes in careers. So, I talk about all the time. People want to, when they're looking to hire, why, and you as a business owner now too, like what makes you look at athletes to hire?
Yeah, both as a business owner and in my other career, my actual day job, I've hired dozens of athletes, and there's a reason for it. I can teach people a lot of things, and I can get them skilled up in a lot of technical aspects. But the one thing I cannot teach is that wiring that an athlete has. And athletes are born. They build their skills, they work at things, but a real athlete, someone who has spent their life doing that, there's a wiring in there that is to compete, to lead, to learn, which usually it seemed like they're in conflict, but they're not. And athletes know how to do that. They know how to take direction, they know how to give direction, they know how to step up when they need to. They know the discipline, obviously. And so when you bring an athlete into your organization, you instantly have things that you can't create already embedded. And so now it becomes much easier as a leader because all I'm doing is teaching the technical aspects of the job. And so it's selfish. Let's be honest. I'm very selfish that way. I'd rather teach somebody one little piece than have to teach them entire job and teach them how to be a leader and a doer as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I've talked about, and I might have talked about offline as well, but just a lot of times with career services, they're looking at the athletes and saying, "Oh, well, you didn't do an internship, you didn't do that." Well, they didn't have time. But then the flip side that I tell the athlete is, being an athlete is your resume, and the things that you bring to the table, like you just addressed. I mean, you're bringing the time management, the practice, the leadership, everything that's of value to a company. Because, like you said, you could teach what they're doing, but you can't teach, some of that skill set or the DNA that the athlete has. So let's after you were coaching, you got a little bit of professional bodybuilding. I mean, talk a little about that. Like, how does that work? I mean, obviously I've seen magazines and stuff like that, but talk about that real quick.
Yeah, so probably right out of the gate, it's natural bodybuilding and the magazines that you typically see on your standard newsstand shelf are two totally different worlds.
Okay.
And it's not that one is better than the other, but in the natural realm, it is completely drug tested. You're tested at every show, and once you earn your pro card, you're tested even at random, just like the NFL or Major League Baseball would be. So you can't take any enhancing drugs whatsoever. It's all done naturally. And I really stumbled into it, to be perfectly honest. One of the cycles I went through in my life is I actually gained more weight than my wife did during my first daughter being born. And it was very unique to me, but it was a sign of exactly the gap I was talking about. As I'd lost myself, my wife was on bed rest with a high risk pregnancy. And so I just ate right along with her and gained weight and wasn't working out and wasn't doing the things I'd always done in my life. And then that athlete came back out and said, "All right, you can't be like this. You got to get back in shape." And so I started doing that and just working out, differently than I ever had, because I wasn't working out for a sport any longer. I was working out for my health and my body. And lo and behold, I stumbled across a magazine called Natural Bodybuilding. And I looked on the cover and went, I kind of look like that. And so I made connections with a couple of guys over in Flint, Michigan, which wasn't too far from our house at the time. And he was a promoter. And I just asked him, I said, give me the rundown on this thing. I had the same perception. I'm sure a lot of people did. A bunch of guys running around in Speedos on stage and all oiled up. And it is that to some extent, but where it really becomes beneficial from a life standpoint, I learned so much about nutrition. I learned so much about how my body functions and operates. You're actually manipulating your body into its worst state, but it looks the best.
Right.
So it's a unique situation because you can't hold on to that very long. That's why you peak and maintain for shows, and then you go right back and you go into more bulking cycles and things like that. But what it did was it reinforced all those same things that sport did, all the discipline, all the actions that you had to take. You had to lay out a plan. You had to execute that plan every single day. For me, it was 16 to 18 weeks to prep for a show. And so you'd go through 16 to 18 weeks of just laser beam focus stand on stage, and then start that cycle all over again. So I did that for about 3 years, and then was at a level where I felt like I could stand on a pro stage. So I went and won my pro card and competed professionally for about 2 years until the kids really started traveling, and then said, all right, got to hang it up and chase the kids around, and don't regret that a bit.
No, that's the best part. I mean, we talked about that. I coached my son across different sports, but mostly baseball, and did the whole travel baseball thing as well. Probably as a coach, not to level as you, because you played college ball and stuff. I was just an amateur, like little league kind of guy, but it was definitely fun. So let's talk about the genesis of Continuum Standard, and then tell us about what
Yeah.
you're doing there.
Yeah. So you've kind of heard a little bit through everything I've said. Is you grow up as an athlete, you live in that structure, and even my my 10-word answer is you're living on somebody else's discipline. The coach is making the plan, the team makes the structure, they tell you where to show up and when to show up. And the thing with an athlete, and I use Evan, who is my co-founder and son-in-law, when you are freakishly gifted, and he is one of those people, you can just execute anything. So someone can come tell you to jump, and you jump really high, and you can do things that other people just can't do. But are you learning how to build a program yourself, how to maintain your own health yourself? And frequently the answer is no. And I experienced it myself. And then for 30 years, I went through these cycles. You heard 2 or 3 of them. I went through 9 different cycles. I got on a road cycle and said, I'm going to do a 100-mile ride at some point. Well, being the maniac that I am, I didn't want to do a 100-mile ride and just finish it. I wanted to try to do it. And so I did that ride in 5 hours and 20 minutes, and on a regular road, not at a track. And that's about a 20-mile-an-hour pace on a road bike on regular roads. Well, to get there, I couldn't just hop on a bike. I had to build a structure, I had to build a training plan. And so I've done that for years, for 30 years, really. Then fast forward, now we're looking at my daughter in school, who had a wonderful experience at Alabama, actually got to play in a Final Four at Alabama, which is just an unbelievable event. She played at a level I could never dream of. Evan did the same thing. They both finished and literally experienced the same exact collapse, the same identity shift. And Evan is still playing professional baseball, and he even is still experiencing it. So the structure is different. They don't care. It's your job now. You show up and you play. You don't do the job, you don't have a job. They're not going to provide the structure to them, the nutrition, the training, anything else. They just, here, come to the field, get on the field and play. Same thing with Brooke is when that's done, there is no more structure. So you either build it yourself or you're going to do what we call drift. And that's one of the concepts that I really hammer home is most athletes are going to find themselves in that drift situation. The Continuum Standard, which is what we built, we actually wrote a book to start with, and it came from Evan and I literally sitting on our back porch talking about that experience and all the things I've had in my head, the programs that I built through the years. I told him, hey, I'll build one for you. He's like, fantastic, let's go. Through those conversations, he said, why haven't you written this down? I said, well, I just never thought about that. So he started writing based on our conversations.
He was your ghostwriter.
The funny thing is it spurred me to do something that I'd never done. I started writing myself, and then we would combine together, and it ended up being the book, No More Game Days. And we're really proud of it. And it really talks about the loss and how to regain it, because the thing of it is athletes will work, they will practice. They have no issue with that whatsoever. But creating the structure that it now isn't a decision to make every day that's the backbone of the Continuum Standard.
Okay, great. And then so who is your target? I mean, obviously athletes, but who's your target market? Like, who are you trying to work with, and how are you getting there?
Yeah. So early on, we are focusing on the former athlete, the athletes coming to the end of their career. That is our wheelhouse right now. But that being said, we are also very interested in former military, because it's the same structure. I have the structured environment. I have a camaraderie, a fraternity, as it were, and then it's gone the minute I retire. Even executives, same situation. They've lived their lives under these massive structures, and now they're without. So we don't want to get too wide. Our heads are swimming with all kinds of places to go. So we're really focusing on the athletes right now, because to be honest, if you get somebody at that stage in their life, now I don't have to go through program after program after program. because that's the piece that we see all the time is they bounce from activity to program and don't know why they have to keep restarting. We want to prevent them from doing that. And our core to that, we call the 4 fence posts. And it's mindset, movement, fuel, and recovery. Everything about your life fits into one of those 4 fence posts. If your 4 fence posts are in shape, they keep it up, your fence post stays in, or your fence stays intact. The fence doesn't keep you in, it tells you where you are. And that's what we believe in the program.
And then, so if one of their fence posts messed up, is that where you're trying to get them back on track? And
exactly. And really, it's not about prescribing. That's the one thing we don't do is we have an iOS app that we've built. We're really happy with it. It does a lot of things, but to be brutally honest, it's simply the 4 fence posts every day, because that's what we believe in. If you take care of those, the rest of your life can fall into order because you have the time to do it. But the coaching, where the coaching comes in, isn't creating what you do about the fence post, it's setting it itself. So it comes back to a very basic principle. I don't care how you work out. I care that you did work out. I care that you planned to work out. I don't care what you eat, what diet you like to follow, but that you planned to follow one. And so we really don't, we're not a fitness app that gets into, here's your plan for the day, here's your workouts and your nutrition. Our objective is to get you understanding how to set standards and embed those standards. One of the things that we studied really deeply was behavioral habits, first of all, and the common knowledge is not correct. 7 days, 7 times hearing something, 30 days. You see all these challenges are 30 days, but they end. It's actually 66 days before a habit becomes normal. And that's not 66 partials. That's 66 days of executing a habit over and over again. We're built on that. And so we tier out our system to, you can't move on to the next level and expand or get more detailed until you've embedded those fence posts for 66 days. Then you can move on. The next piece of coaching that we really do is your accountability. Yes, you can keep somebody close to you, but the accountability belongs to you. No one else is going to own it. And a lot of the fitness apps that are out there today, they gamify it, streaks and badges, and put yourself up on a leaderboard, and it creates motivation. I don't believe that motivation is your solution, because motivation is going to come and it's going to go. And it's a fleeting thing. You're going to have a day where you feel like doing everything in the world. You're going to have the next day and you can't do anything. So what you have to do is you have to fall back to your standards. You don't rise to standards, you fall back to them. So if you have a standard that's set on for your worst day and accomplish it every day, you can build from that. But so many people, they set their standards so high, so early, because of the challenges and all the culture that we've set out there, that they go into this intensity and you can only maintain it for 3 or 4 days or a couple weeks at a time. This program is intended to be the system that you live in for the rest of your life.
That's great. So people, how can they find you? Like, how do they find you? How do they find the app?
Yeah, so continuumstandard.com is our website, and the app is Continuum Standard with habits on the end of it, because it was a keyword that we wanted to make sure we were searchable. So both those and the app, and then the books are on Amazon. So No More Game Days is on Amazon, and The End of Starting Over, which is also on Amazon.
Okay, great. And then I guess they could find you on LinkedIn or Facebook. And
yep, we are hitting all the social media, Continuum Standard on all the social media platforms, and look for us.
There you go. So everybody, you got to check out Continuum Standard. You can find us at alumnidirect.com. On our YouTube channel is where you'll find Athletes, Entrepreneurs, and Alumni Journey, as well as across different podcast networks, Spotify, Apple. And each week, I always talk about the nuggets, as I mentioned earlier, and Brad gave some great ones today. And it's important. I mean, we really want to make an impact on athletes. It is a major issue with the transition out of sport. A lot of sad stories that, that are out there today. And we just want athletes to know that there's help out there. There's people like Brad, myself, and other partners that want to make a difference and know that, you got a long life ahead of you. You got many years after you're done sport. You did fantastic in that. Let's be fantastic in life as well. So Brad, thank you again so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure.